and look at some of the policies or tax reforms that the Kenya Kwanza administration is planning to implement. And Sterling Muchiri will break it down for us. You know very well that President William Ruto did task Kenya Revenue Authority to collect 3 trillion shillings, which is equal to the budget, the current budget, that is 2022-2023. Where will it get this money, or how are we going to expand the tax base to ensure that this money is collected? Welcome to the studio, Sterling Muchiri.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay. Before we even look at the tax regime and look at how some of the various reforms that Kenya Kwanza administration is proposing, we are nearing 100 days as under the Kenya Kwanza administration. I'd like to tell us, what do you think, or how would you rate their performance till to date?
Well, what I would say, Carol, is that it's still early because tax matters and public finance matters take quite a bit of time to execute. And maybe if I could say, if I could just give definition of taxes, because taxes are an involuntary, these are involuntary levies by the government to finance public expenditure. So it really depends. You know, they are not things that you can do overnight. They are things that can take quite a bit of time.
But the regime, the current regime did say that in the first 100 days, we'll see the cost of living coming down. We'll also see the Hustler Fund, which actually we are expecting it to be rolled out on November of this month, or 30th of this month. And also we saw areas of agriculture, small and medium enterprises, as key areas that this government is focusing on. When you look at these 100 days, have they been able to achieve some of these things that they had talked about?
From a public finance perspective, talking of taxes, obviously I've not seen any major, development. But I think the way to look at it is that these things have to be long-term. You have to look at them in the long-term perspective. Some of the changes may bear fruit quite shortly because if you're looking at taxes again, the factors that influence whether you are successful in tax collection, some of them could be legal issues. Yeah, some of them could be institutional issues, some of them could be administrative issues, and some of them are economic issues. So, for instance, if you look at the legal issues, legal and institutional issues, our laws, Kenya has always been a low tax jurisdiction. We don't tax people so much. So taxes like property taxes, capital gains taxes have always been low. But you see the government has been trying to increase these taxes over time. Then things like, if you look at the economy, we are coming from COVID-19. We are having the issues of inflation, the wars in Ukraine. So this really affects the local businesses. Yeah, and taxes, most of the taxes are collected when business people make money. So if the cost of doing business is very high, then it also becomes hard to collect taxes properly.
But
some issues
I'm sure if I may cut you short.
Okay.
3 trillion shillings is what the current government has tasked Kenya Revenue Authority to collect. The last financial year, we saw Kenya Revenue Authority surpass by a huge margin, but this time around we are seeing a gap in terms of collecting taxes, and we saw that they have a gap of about 10.6 million.
Yep.
Yes. Where do we get this money from to fund this, some of these proposals that the government has given?
Some of them could be quick wins. I can point out like the issue about tax dispute resolution. You remember, like about 2 years ago, the tax tribunal did not have any members. So for more than a year, tax disputes are not being resolved. Then after that, when the members were appointed, there was an issue of the appointment of a chairman. And then that again delayed the dispute resolution process. And at that time, it was said that 300 billion was stuck in taxes, was stuck through the tax dispute resolution process at the tribunal, under the High Court and the Court of Appeal. Now 300 billion is quite a huge amount. I think for now it must have gone up. It's somewhere maybe almost half a trillion or so. So if that issue is the issue of tax dispute resolution is resolved in a fast way, then that's an easy way of unlocking money. Then there's been a bit of a political pull and push between the judiciary and the tax, and the tax tribunal. So it was not very clear whether the tax tribunal belongs to the executive or the judiciary. Yeah, so at some point the Treasury announced for tribunal members. Then after that, the judiciary also announced for tribunal members. Then again, remember, we didn't have enough judges at the High Court and the Court of Appeal. So again, that delayed quite a bit. But if now, since the president has appointed judges, the tribunal, we assume it's going to, to be more proactive, then you are likely to unlock quite a huge chunk, probably up to $500 billion of taxes from that process.
So is there a likelihood for some of these areas that the government is targeting to ensure that they increase these taxes or reduce or rather scrap them altogether?
If we are to increase the tax collections, then we have to go back and look at our laws and see, are there areas that we do not tax? Yeah. So things like capital gains tax, for sure. If you look at the medium term, between the next in the next 5 years, you'd expect capital gains tax to go up. To be more comparative with other tax rates, maybe in the East African region, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and so on and so forth. You might also expect the government to be more aggressive in trying to nab foreigners who do not pay taxes, their fair share of taxes in Kenya. And that is a worldwide problem. It's not only a Kenyan problem. It's a problem that even other countries struggle with, taxing the digital businesses, taxing companies like Google, Zoom, that do business in Kenya, but they don't pay their a fair share of taxes. So again, if the government and KRA, if they are more aggressive in trying to make sure that foreign businesses pay their taxes, then we are likely to have more taxes being collected.
But what is a favorable tax regime? I know the National Treasury has invited various tax reforms from the public sector as well as the private and also NGO and civil society. But what is a favorable tax regime? And when you look at the group that is taxed, and you've talked about expanding the tax base to also include the informal sector, how would you describe the changes that are happening right now with the tax laws?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. That's a good question, and the National Treasury published their draft tax policy, trying to give guidance on how they're going to approach taxes for the next 5 years. The good thing about the policy is that they are trying to introduce some form of stability in such a way that if taxes are set, they don't change for about 5 years or so. But for a good tax regime, for you to set up a good tax regime, then you have to look at what we call the canons of taxation. And you're basically looking at 4 factors. Number one, the tax system has to be equal and equitable, which means that as many people as possible pay taxes, and also people pay according to their ability. So those who can pay more, pay more. Those who can pay less, then pay less. And when you talk about the hustler, because I know most Kenyans are hustlers, people who are living below 30,000, 20,000. So you don't want to overburden those people too much with taxes, because they also have their other living their living expenses to cater for. Now, the second thing to consider about proper tax system is convenience. So paying taxes should not be a burden, and it should not be a bother. And if people feel that paying taxes is too burdensome, then they tend to avoid taxes, and they tend to go informal. So things like you're looking at the TIMS, the tax invoice management system that was introduced by KRA about an year ago. By their very admission, the compliance with that system is about 60%. Because those devices that KRA want taxpayers to buy may be quite expensive. They cost between 60,000 and 150,000. So for small businesses that are struggling with paying rents and employees, that is a substantial cost. So some of the businesses may not see it as convenient. The other thing is, the economy. Is the cost of collecting taxes too much? Like the cost of collecting taxes from the small businesses, whether you're talking of matatus, whether you're talking of small traders, can be quite high. So compared to what you actually realize from those efforts, it may not make sense. So that's one of the other things that they need to look at. Obviously, the last one, if I may, the last one is certainty. The last canon is certainty. It should be very simple for even common people to tell when, how, and how much taxes should be paid. So if there's a problem in, if it requires a lot of technical expertise for people to comply with taxes, then again that tax system becomes hard to administer.
And all these changes, what you just mentioned, are we likely to see tax revenue collection go above 25%? Because right now it's 25% of the gross domestic product.
It's actually much lower. It's about 14%, between 14 to 15%. And for a country like Kenya that relies more on taxation rather than other forms of public finance, that's not a good level. A good level would be probably in the range of 20%. 22% or thereabouts. So if the government is to realize that level of maybe 20% or so, then they would collect an extra like 800 billion or so. And because the GDP is also growing at 5 to 7%, then you might expect the level of tax collections to go up. But again, the reason why we are not doing good, so really it tells you that our laws, our administrative, our tax administration measures are not really aligned. So that is why we are not collecting enough taxes vis-a-vis to what we produce as a country.
But some critics have said, and if I may talk about some of the proposals by the Kenya Kwanza administration, that some of these interventions, they estimate to cut down spending to about 2.67 or rather trillion shillings in the next 5 years to 2027. Given the current financial constraints, are we likely to see that drop in spending as a country?
We as a country, we are very ambitious. You remember, we want to grow into a middle-income country by 2030. And according to Vision 2030, we have very ambitious plans, both from a physical, infrastructural point of view, and also on the social perspective. So our targets and our vision we cannot do with cuts in budgets. Yeah, we can only, we cannot contract. We can only grow by increasing the social and infrastructure. So I don't think it's reasonable to say that we expect our public expenditure to contract or to decrease. It will obviously grow up. It will obviously grow upwards. So maybe if there's a shortage in tax collections, then what the government means to do is to look for other ways of, bridging that gap, either through borrowing, or attracting more investors in Kenya and growing the economy so that the tax collections can go up.
Okay, but the current President William Ruto was categorical, saying that the borrowing, they're going to bring down the debt that we are currently having, and this is by cutting spending on some projects and redirecting that resources to various other projects that are not capital intensive. Now, on his inaugural speech, he did say that he will propose to impose higher taxes on Kenya's super and higher income earners. Yeah, and this is not the first time that they are introducing the wealth tax. That was also introduced in 2018. Will this tax this time around sail through Parliament?
Well, I think it's a tricky situation. We can't give a yes or no answer. But as a country, we obviously need to grow, so we need to raise finances. Then taxation is also, quite political. Given that the same people that you want to tax, are the same people that are running the government, because most of the rich in Kenya tend to be politically connected, and people do business with government. And in fact, research has shown that the main impediment to introduction of taxes like this is goodwill from the political classes, because they do not want to be taxed. And at times when you introduce these taxes, they impact also on the people who sponsor those politicians. Yeah, so it's a case of not trying to rattle the cage too much. But what usually happens is that we'll have incremental changes. So like for the instance of the capital gains tax, in 2015, we didn't have it, but then it was introduced at 5%. Then the rates keep on going up. So that I would expect that in the next 5 to 10 years, that rate will probably have gone up to the normal rate of 30%, and that can give quite a bit of tax collections.
Okay, capital gain tax. Let's talk about that. How is it hurting the real estate sector? Because it keeps on going up. Now we are at 15%. How is it hurting the real estate sector? Taxes
most of the times have the effect of discouraging investment in certain sectors, and some of the causes are, some of the effects are imagined, some of them are very real. So for people who are doing genuine businesses in the real estate, in the real estate sector, maybe the taxes may not, they may not affect the businesses so much, or their willingness to continue investing in that business. But for people getting in, trying to get into the business, some of them may look at that rising cost in taxation and think that it's not a good tax, and they may probably not choose not to invest in the real estate sector. But generally, most taxes, if they are handled properly and well, then going back to our canons of taxation, business people should not feel it too much as a burden. Yeah, so long as they're seeing a value. Yeah, so if we have more security in the country, if we have infrastructure provided for the real estate sector, power, sewers, then people will not feel the pinch in investing in those sectors and paying taxes. But it is a problem if if you want to put up your building and then you have to put up your own sewerage. You have to dig up your own boreholes. You have to make your own roads to that particular site. You have to, you go to Kenya Power and they tell you have to bear the whole cost, 1 million plus, to put up transformers. Then if at the same time you're being asked to pay tax, 15% of what you make from that project, then you see it doesn't feel right. Yeah. But so long as the government the taxes that are collected are used reasonably and responsibly, and the government is accountable, then people will not feel the pinch of paying taxes. Okay,
and you say the capital gain tax is likely to go up to 30%.
Yes, that's the way we are heading. I see it. In the long term, it's likely to go up all the way to 30%.
Okay. Now, should the government adopt arbitration, self-disclosure initiatives to widen the collection in the property sector?
Yes, that needs to be done. And if you also look at our constitution, alternative dispute resolution is one of the methods that are given as constitutionally recognized ways of resolving disputes, whether they are personal disputes or administrative disputes like tax disputes. And I think even from, if you look at the statistics, a lot of taxes have been unlocked because KRA and the taxpayers decided to settle the taxes out of the court system. And there is even some regulations that were published to enable taxpayers settle disputes out of the court system. They don't have to, they don't have to wait for the judge or the tribunal to determine how much taxes are payable, and that is much cheaper. It is faster, and it also tends to make sure that the relationships between KRA and the taxpayers are still retained. They're still amiable after the dispute. So as a tax professional, I would encourage all taxpayers to consider the alternative dispute resolution means that are provided under the laws.
Okay. Now, this administration also did say that you strike a revenue balance by removing stamp duty on first-time property owners and raising compliance for other property-related levies like land rates. How will that work?
Okay. For stamp duty, again, raising stamp duties for existing landowners is probably, the investors are not likely to appreciate that. For the first-time owners, maybe it's a way of encouraging people to buy properties, houses, especially the affordable houses. Yes, because one of the ways government uses taxes also is to encourage certain behaviors. So on one side, you cannot have government building affordable houses, then on the other side, punishing people who want to buy affordable houses by asking them to pay stamp duty of up to 4% in urban areas. Yeah, so that is striking a balance between that. Between the tax collections and the tax and the incentives to own properties.
Let's go back now to the wealth tax. I want us to dwell there. The only out of the 38 organizations for economic cooperation and development, only 3 European countries levy the net wealth tax. I would like to know, there are only like 2 countries who tax not on the net worth of individuals, but also, but basically on the assets. Okay. Is that the way we are supposed to do it as a country as well?
Well, we have elements of taxation of property, net worth. for most of the countries, and in most of the countries, property taxes or net worth taxes are usually imposed at the local levels, the county. In Kenya, that would be the county level. In countries like Switzerland, you talk of the canton levels. So those are the ones that charge rates, property rates. So if you hold a plot or a piece of land in a certain locality, then you pay the property taxes. So in Kenya, those property taxes, that is the domain of the counties to tax. The counties, most of them struggle with administrative issues. Most of the counties can't tell how many properties they have in the areas of jurisdiction. They can't tell the true values of those properties. They can't tell the last time rates were paid. For the counties especially, this is a way of property rates are an easy way of raising taxes. Okay, and so the government is proposing bringing down, ensuring that licenses are not too many, but they are just one. Is there a way of also ensuring that revenue collection goes up as well? In terms of licenses? Yes, yes. Already we have what you call the single business permits in most of the local governments, and that has really cut down the bureaucracy in starting and running businesses. Because before then we used to have, if you wanted to set up a business, you would be required to go and get fire licenses, this licenses, that license. Now it's only one permit. But nevertheless, having said that, as a country we also have very many regulators. So for instance, if you want to set up a construction, you are dealing with the local authority, you are dealing with the National Construction Authority, you're dealing with very many other regulators. If you want to do manufacturing, you're dealing with Kenya Bureau of Standards, you're dealing with KIPI, you're dealing with NEMA, so you're also dealing with very many regulators. So one way of cutting down that bureaucracy would be maybe to streamline and unify the payment processes, so that in as much as you have all these regulators, if reducing the regulators is not an option, then you can set up one shop, like what we have with the Huduma Center, where you just walk in and you can handle all your regulatory things. If it's issue of paying statutory payments like taxes, NHF, NSSF, the housing fund contributions, then again all these can be collected all at once through filing one return, maybe on the iTax system. So that way you reduce the bureaucracy and the time spent in administration, and the process is also much more responsive. And that not only reduces the cost of business, but also attracts investors into the country. And speaking of the digital space, we saw the introduction of the digital tax or digital service tax from 1 to 1.3%, right? Yes. And then we saw just recently with the Finance Bill 2022, the introduction of 14% VAT on any advertisement on this space. Does this hurt the innovation space in our country? It does not hurt really, because you see that the digital services tax is a tax imposed on foreigners who do business in Kenya. And that has always been a problem, because the way people do business these days has changed. You could be in Kenya, but you're offering your creative services in Uganda. An Indian company, an American company could be servicing the same clients in Kenya that local providers are competing with. But these Indian, American companies may not be paying taxes in Kenya. and that becomes an unfair advantage for them, and it also means that it's a loss of tax revenues for a country like Kenya, because if it was being done by a Kenyan, then Kenya would be collecting taxes. And again, this is not a problem that only Kenya faces. Yeah, it's a worldwide problem. And the OECD, I believe you mentioned OECD earlier on. The OECD has come up with those 18 or so action points to make sure that countries make their fair share of tax revenues wherever the customers, wherever multinational enterprises are making money. So Kenya is simply plugging in to a movement that has already gained a lot of traction in the developing countries, especially the OECD countries. And at the end of the day, really, we are, we are making sure that companies that do business in the cloud are able to pay taxes to the respective governments where they are making money.
As we come to a close, will Kenya Kwanza administration be able, or rather Kenya Revenue, able to collect 3 trillion shillings by the end of this financial year?
It's very easy. I think it's very easy looking at the quick gains. I think we mentioned like the issue of the taxes that are locked up in dispute, in the disputes. So those are quick. Okay. They can easily unlock money from that side. But on the other side, it's also a challenge because economy has not fully recovered. Yeah, so it's possible, but the government also needs to be quite proactive and serious in trying to collect the extra revenue.
Thank you so much, Sterling Muchiri. That has been Muchiri, who is a tax partner at East African Consulting, talking about tax matters and speaking about some of the regulatory reforms that Kenya Kwanza administration is working on to ensure that the tax base is expanded and also to ensure that our revenue collection goes up. Now, on World Cup matches, we have Switzerland and Cameroon coming at 1 p.m. live on right here at KBC Channel 1. Remember, World Cup Eco KBC. We have Brazil versus Serbia at 10 p.m. But we are not showing that, but that will be on all radio stations. Group H, you have Uruguay versus Korea at 4 p.m. And also Portugal versus Ghana at 7 p.m. live here on KBC. Remember, Cameroon is usually called the Indomitable Lions and qualified for the FIFA World Cup 8 times, more than any other African team. And Ghana, which is nicknamed as Black Stars, unlike Cameroon, Ghana doesn't have a long history in the World Cup, and they have only qualified for the World Cup 4 times. That is where we put a cap on Business Check this morning, and I will hand you now over to Dunda, she's coming up next after we take this short commercial break.